Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny Davis. Welcome to Zoom with the Principal. So this week we are continuing our conversation about the book, The Gift of Failure. I don't have anybody with me today to help have a conversation with. So parents that are here, hopefully you guys are able to put a lot of comments in the chat. If you want to raise your hand and speak out, I welcome that. Otherwise, it's just going to be a lot of me talking. I want to start today by talking about why I chose this book and why I think this is an important topic. I actually just yesterday afternoon, every month I write an article for the school newspaper for the students. And this month, I just finished it yesterday. I wrote about this topic and why we should see failure as a gift and not something to be ashamed about and to see as something that's just awful. That, failure can be something that we see that can actually really help us. And there's this phenomenon called failure deprivation. If you guys were to Google that term, failure deprivation, you'll see a lot of articles about colleges being very concerned about the students that are starting college, our recent high school graduates, experiencing failure deprivation, meaning they've never faced and had to overcome any sort of failure. That, they always did well in school, that, their parents shielded them from anything that, was difficult. And that when they go out on their own and they're in the real world, it's really difficult for them, and they're having a very hard time adjusting. So that's why I think this is a really important topic. We see it a lot, especially in a school like Piedmont Hills. Piedmont Hills is a very high achieving school. We have a lot of students have done very, very well. And sometimes when they don't do well, they have a hard time coping. And so I think it's really important in our job as parents to teach them that. So I wanted to start today kind of really setting groundwork. Maybe I should have done that last week, of why I think this is an important topic. Okay, so for my first question that I want to talk about today, in regards to the book, and just even if you're not reading the book, it's okay. How can you help your child grow their resolve and resourcefulness? And I think that this is something that it's difficult for us as parents to step back. They talk a lot in this section of the book about kids doing chores, and that, sometimes as parents, we don't have them do things like that because it's easier. I know for my part, I'm always like, it'd just be easier if I do it myself, or they're not going to fold the towels the way I want them to fold, or they certainly won't, put everything in the dishwasher the way I think it should be. And so it's just easier for me to do it. And that short term, I'm just going to do it because it's easier and it's faster, it's not really serving our kids all that well. And so it's the idea of, when you're teaching them resolve and resourcefulness, to let them figure it out. I'm welcome anybody in the chat. What your experience is with giving your kids chores, and how do they do with it, and how do you get past well, they didn't really do it the way I wanted them to do it. How do you get past that? While you guys are thinking and putting some stuff in the chat, I want to, sorry, my radio. I want to read this little part. This is on the bottom of page 83 and 84. Because a lot of times I think with this, we as parents can, especially when you're having them do chores and you want them to take it out of the trash, or you want them to clean the room, you're constantly nagging at them, do this, do this, do this. I experienced this this past Sunday, where my son had this English project he had to get done. And I nagged and yelled at him. I swear to you, it was for 7 hours, and it was 30 minutes of work when he actually buckled down and did it. But it was exhausting. Just the constant, Nathan, you got to do this. Nathan, have you done this yet? And it was just awful. So this quote is, nagging and pestering is the fastest way to destroy motivation, as well as destroy your connection and relationship with your child. Even if that dish sits on the table for 2 days, don't nag or hover. Absolutely no swooping or fixing. Be present and help problem solve. which is, I think, sometimes really difficult for us to do. Because can you imagine like letting that crusty dish sit there for 2 days because you asked them to do it? Or my son, was a major project, and like, should I have just like let him suffer the consequences? Maybe, but it was really hard for me as parents. And so I think sometimes we have to kind of pick and choose our battles in this area. That's kind of where I'm like kind of like settled on this, that maybe, his soda cans, I'm going to let that go and not nag him about that. And hopefully he will eventually clean them up. But the bigger, like the English project, which was a really big deal, that's where I'm going to like kind of save all my, like, this is where I'm going to nag you. I don't know, parents' thoughts, anybody have any comments on that, on where you fall down on this? Do you find yourself being a nagger? Okay, so yeah, in the comments says, yes, same here. I tend to do almost everything because it's just easier. And it is. I had my sophomore do his first load of laundry all by himself this past week. Sounds minor, but I felt like it was a shift for me to let go and have him learn something new and to go through the thought process of all the steps it takes to get done. I think that's great. And I think that I always recommend like times where you have like time off from school and vacation, where maybe it's a little bit of town time, like you save that, like, or on the weekend, like that's a great time that like, that's where you're like, okay, I'm going to teach you to do something. And like, we're going to like learn how to do this. And so like choosing those times where maybe life is a little bit easier for you. And then that's when you can like focus on this, because I think that's great. Like teaching your son how to do laundry. That's amazing, because he's going to need to learn that skill. Like you're not going to be there to do his laundry when he goes away to college, or he's going to be one of those people that brings home like 15 huge duffel bags of dirty clothes at Christmas. Can you imagine? So you don't want that. Okay. His great. Yes, great idea. It will be less stress during the free time so we can be more patient. Exactly. I always find that like kind of check in with yourself first, and like, do you have the wherewithal to fight this fight? And if you don't, maybe at that time let go, because I think, we talk a lot about self-care, like to do that for yourself, like have that self-care for yourself, because then I think it prevents those conversations not turning into the nagging and not turning into like you saying things that like maybe you wish you wouldn't say. I mean, that was definitely me on Sunday with my son. I was having a tough day. I was really stressed out about some stuff that were happening at school. And like, there was, just some things that I was worried about. Just bad timing that he had that English project. And so I wasn't at my best. He was not at his best. It was not a good day in our household. My kids are doing their own laundry, but they don't fold their clothes the way I want and taught them to, but I let it go. I'm not sure if that's okay. I think that that's totally okay. And I know when I was a kid, and my mom, this was something she let go with me. And I'm still, as an adult, I have a hard time with this. I never put my laundry away. I will do my laundry, but I like that last step of actually putting it away. I never get around to that. Luckily, I have a husband that that's his chore and he does that. So I don't really, I married well, so to speak. So I don't really have to worry about that. But I think that, if you got your kids to like do the laundry, if they don't finish it the way you want, hey, it's like, take that win where you've got it. Like you taught them, like they're doing the laundry. They have clean clothes. That's good. So take the win. All right. So my next question, we're going to shift this a little bit. And this is kind of a heavy question. So how do you model positive, healthy friendships? Do you discuss with your teen what characteristics they should look for in a good friend? Have you talked about the limits for unhealthy or risky behavior? So this is one of those like difficult conversations that, especially, I think that, and they talk in this section a lot about like the middle school years and then going into high school, but I think that this is, with my daughter going away to college, and having conflicts now, not serious conflicts, but like little like space conflicts with her roommates, and her learning how to navigate that. And so, and she will come to me with it for advice, which is great. But I think that you have to like talk to them about that and like let them navigate that themselves. Cause like, I think the worst thing that we could do is to try to navigate that for them, especially when they get into high school. Like you as a parent shouldn't be like trying to talk to the other parents and like try to like make this like work for them. Like they actually need to figure out these relationships for themselves. And it can be really difficult, because they may have friends that you don't think are the best influences, and you may be thinking that they are doing things that you wouldn't approve of. Like this can be really difficult. And so in this area, like my advice, and I think this was the advice in the book too, is the more communication you have and open communication and just going with like, hey, you can tell me anything. I might get mad, but it's not going to be forever. I'm still going to love you. Like that type of communication and like talking is the best thing, and it talks about, like, should you snoop through their room? Should you snoop through their phone? I think you have to walk that line, and be really careful about breaking their trust, because that could do some permanent damage to your relationship with your teenager. And you don't want that. At the same time, if you think that they're doing something dangerous, you need to step in. I'm actually going to read you guys. Let me find it. This is on page 116 to 117. If your child is in trouble or at risk for dangerous behavior such as substance abuse, depression, eating disorders, or any other number of pitfalls that come up in your teenager's life, remember that you have the power to align yourself with your child and help them cope. Keep autonomy, love, and support at the forefront of your priorities so as to not risk alienating yourself from your child and losing the opportunity to save them from peril. At the first sign of drug or alcohol abuse, eating disorders, self-injury, seek professional help rather than attempt to handle the situation for yourself. Above all else, do not promise your child that you can fix his problem, social or otherwise. You may not be able to, and it's important that your child understands that not everything can magically be remedied with the wave of a parental wand. And I really like that last sentence, because the teenage years are really, really tough. They're probably going to have their first boyfriend or girlfriend. And they're going to, get their heart broken for the first time. They will have fights with their friends that will seem devastating. And there's a lot of stuff. The best thing that you can do as a parent is to just listen to them and be there for them. And not promise to fix it, because quite honestly, you're not going to be able to fix it. And so that's part of the idea with this, the gift of failure is, sometimes like, I think we think of that idea of failure as like in purely like academic terms when we're talking about our teenagers, but failure can be your first love, when you broke up and like your relationship failed, and like learning to cope with that, and learning to get past that. That's a huge thing for them to experience. And, we can't shield them from that, but I think that we can create that warm and safe environment at home that, like they can talk to you about that. I don't know, anything that you guys or questions you guys have in this area or thoughts that you have. This, this is a tough subject. And I think that, as adults, I don't know about you, but I find as adults, like my friendships as an adult are different. I have a lot of friends, the people I'm friends with, you spend so much, if you are working, you spend so much time at work. And so like you're really close to those people, but then you have this separation. I think my friendships now as an adult, I don't feel them with the same intensity as I did when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, my friends were like the center of my world. They meant everything to me. And to the point where I remember my mom like disparaging, I spend so much time with my friends and care so much about them that, and I'm not listening to my family, or I'm not spending as much time with my family. And I think that's totally normal, but it's, you know, it's important to model healthy relationships. It's important to talk to them about healthy relationships. Um, it's important to teach them to put their own priorities first and to stand up for themselves. My daughter recently, just this past weekend, got into her first like major fight with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend, my daughter's 20, she's in college, and this is her first, well, it's not her first real relationship because she did have one in high school, but it's definitely his first real relationship. And he's doing dumb boy stuff. He's not used to being in a relationship. And so, me talking to my daughter, like, hey, you've got to stand up for yourself and say, like, you didn't like this and this is what you expect, but also like learn to like, when do you give second chances? When do you not? Like what's a deal breaker and what's not? And I think that that's important to, teach our kids and have those conversations. One way that I found, this is going to sound so silly, and I think I've actually said this before in one of these parent Zooms. A couple of years ago, I think it was during the pandemic, my daughter and I watched Love Island together, which is the dumbest reality show. But it was a great way for her and I to have conversations about relationships that wasn't so intense and personal, because we weren't talking about her. We were talking about the people we were seeing on TV. And so having kind of theoretical conversations about relationships, that was actually really good. So I found that really worked. Like watching one of those reality dating shows with my child actually was a great way to have those conversations and not have it be, we're kind of removed, and it's not so like in your face and like not about them, where they're going to get all defensive and then you're going to get all defensive and upset. I don't know. Have you guys had any sort of experience with that, and how have you dealt with that, either with dating or even with friendships or like conversations you've had with your kids? Maybe you haven't, and that's coming. We'll move on to the next question. So what attributes make the most supportive and effective sports parents? Oh God, we went from dating to sports. So, I see this a lot as principal. I see parents in the crowd not behaving well. This is a phenomenon that's just, all principals talk about this, like, oh, the game last night, there's a parent and it was awful. This is not just something that happens at Piedmont. It happens at all high schools. Actually, if you guys remember, Coach Keesley, who's our athletic director, he in the first semester came and did one of these meetings with me, and we talked about sportsmanship for parents. This is a big problem across the country. And sports are great. My daughter was an athlete throughout high school. I don't know if my son's going to be. He doesn't really seem to care about that. But so I've been the parent of an athlete, and I think sports are great. I think sports are an essential part of high school. I don't think, I look at my son, I don't think it's necessary that they do sports. I think it's important that they do something outside of academics. It can be clubs, it can be different things, but sports are great. What I really like about sports is it's a place for them to experience failure and disappointment in a low stakes environment. They're going to, it's going to be very rare that, on a sports team that they will have an undefeated season. That's very, very rare. And nothing that our current sports teams are experiencing. So they're going to lose games. They're going to not make the touchdown or not get their fastest time in track, so, or not, score the goal. Like they're going to have disappointments, and it's a game. And so that's what I mean by low stakes. It's not something that they failed their final and now they've got a bad grade in their class and that's preventing them from going to college. That's more high stakes. This is, sports are like low stakes. So that's one of the reasons I think sports are so good for them to experience in high school. And the best way that we can be parents and be parents of athletes is be supportive, but don't push. And by be supportive, I mean, be supportive of, as a parent, it's difficult being a parent of an athlete. You've got to drive them to the games. They have practices at weird times. It screws up your dinner schedule for the family. I know, but that's the type of thing that like making that work for you and the family and being supportive that way, going to their games, getting them to the practice, making sure that they're still eating dinner, even though it might be like 4:30 in the afternoon before practice, or maybe they're eating at 8 o'clock at night after practice. But just making sure that they're getting what they need. That's what being supportive is, like helping them manage that. But we shouldn't push if they don't have their best game, if they don't, perform the way they wanted to be, it's okay. My daughter, when she was a junior in high school, my daughter was a wrestler and was a very good wrestler. She was actually ranked second in CCS, going into the CCS finals. This was in February of 2020. I look back now and I'm wondering if my daughter was not one of the first people to get COVID, because in February 2020, right when the CCS finals were happening, she was so sick. Like I've never seen her be that sick. We don't know if it was COVID, very well might have been. And she did not perform well in CCS. Like we were going into that whole season the way we thought she was going to qualify for state. Like that was kind of the goal. That was what, we were all expecting. And she did not qualify for state. And it was devastating to her. Like she failed at her goals. It was really, really difficult. And, we just had to like it sucks and help her move past that. It was really, but it took a while. I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. Like that was, when I say this low stakes environment, that wasn't so low stakes for her. Like she really, like that was her goal, and like it didn't happen. And there was no, especially then with the pandemic starting right after, it became very apparent, like there was going to be no second chance. Like that was it. Like she had to let go of that and that dream. And it was a really important life lesson for her, and really difficult. And so, but I think it's something that, even though it was very, very painful at the time, it's something that she's going to be able to look back on, like when she's an adult, and look at like kind of that was a transformative thing that happened to her, and that it was a good thing, that she learned a lot about herself and how she can get past it and how she can be resilient. And still be okay. And I think that that's really like when your child experiences a really difficult failure that you can't fix it. And they have to learn how to deal with that. And you as a parent too, I'm not going to lie, because, I was super proud of her. I mean, my daughter was ranked second in CCS in wrestling. Like she was really good at it. We dreamed like, oh my God, she can compete in state and like get on the podium in state and like all this stuff. And it would be like such like, yeah, I was bragging about her. It was difficult for me when she experienced that failure. And so I think sometimes as parents, we get kind of wrapped up in our like kids' glory when they do really well. And then when they don't, whoa, it can be really hard for us too. And so we also experience that failure. So I don't know, like parents, any other, like, have you guys experienced anything like that? Or just like seeing them just fail and wow, that it's bad. Like you can't, there's no second chance. Like that's it. Um, or you yourself failed at something. I think that that's also something to, when you have a failure, sharing that with your child. I remember, so 5 years ago, before I became the principal of Piedmont Hills, I actually applied to be the principal at Evergreen Valley High School. And I did not get the job. I was convinced I was going to get the job. I was convinced that I was the best candidate, did not get it. And I was really upset about that. And I didn't hide it. I like shared it with my kids and my family that I was really disappointed that I considered that a failure. And I was really like, it really bothered me. But it worked out for the best because a couple of months later, the principalship of Piedmont Hills opened up and I did get that job. And this is a much better fit for me. I am much happier here than I would have been at Evergreen. And so that, I think that sometimes is like, yeah, you have that setback and that failure, but you know, like expression, when one door closes and one door closes and window opens, like, you know, like something else is going to come along and it's actually going to work out. But getting past that at the time is really hard. Vincent says, my kids are in clubs. I'm a handoff and keep my inputs to myself. Seeing them learn and grow with their first nervous interview to participate and manage activities and being the liaison with middle schoolers, they become more confident with all the lessons and failures learned along the way. That's exactly right. You know, as they, you know, don't do something well, maybe it's not like a huge failure, but like they stumbled over their words in an interview. They didn't say something the right way. You know, like later on going like, oh, I could have said it this, I should have said this. Those are learning opportunities. And like ways, and that's why like this whole title of the book, The Gift of Failure, like that's the main thing. Like you take that failure and you learn from it and you look at like, how can we, or how can I change for next times? Ale says, sharing my mistakes with my son helps him learn. He does not have to get defensive and shows him that I am not perfect either. It's about getting back up and moving forward. Exactly right. And that, you know, when you have a setback, like, it's like, okay, that acknowledging the loss, you know, it's kind of that when we talked about the idea of radical acceptance, and like, yeah, you don't have to like it, but you accept it. Like that didn't happen for you. And moving on, and how do you learn from that and how do you move on? Okay, I feel like I'm bouncing all over the place with my questions today, shifting topics. So my next question is, when organizational strategies go wrong, how have you handled it and how can you support your child next time? And so if you, in the fall, I had our school psychologist, Emily Mathey, come and talk about executive functioning. And I think executive functioning, and it talks about executive functioning in this book, is really important. And the point that the book makes is executive functioning is a skill, and it's a skill that develops at different rates for every child. Some kids, they're just organized, they've got it, they've got their binder, they've got their, you know, they've got their system, they're organized, they know where everything is. Other kids, it talks about the book, you know, there's this like line in the book that made me laugh out loud, like reaching your hand in your child's backpack and like fearing for your life that, you know, something's going to come out and bite you because their backpack is so gross. That's kind of like my two children. My daughter, super organized, you know, she was organized. My son has the grody backpack that God only knows what's in there. He brought his PE clothes home the other day and I made the mistake of smelling them, and whoa, that was, yeah, boys' PE clothes, whew, especially in 8th grade. That was something. So with organizational strategies, what you have to do as a parent is help them figure out a system. And I think you do have to, like, I think in some things you just like let them figure out, but then this is also kind of like with the laundry. Teach them, and then watch them and let them like do it. Like you're not doing it for them, but you've taught them. And so teach them different types of strategies for getting organized and see what fits for them. Sometimes having everything in a binder will work. Sometimes they need a planner. Sometimes it's like having different folders for every class. You know, when I was in college, I had a spiral notebook for every class that I had. And in my backpack, like I had this like system that I would, when the class was over, I put it in the back of the backpack. And so like the notebooks, like as I had my classes, they just shifted to the front. And it was just this organizational system that I had. It was kind of weird now that I think about it. I'm also, my system for taking notes and keeping track of what I need to do has changed with every job I've had. And so I think that's another important thing to teach your kids, that what works for them right now may not work when they go to college. It may not work when they have a job. So I've had various, like when I was a teacher, I've been both the different types of associate principals and, you know, and now being a principal, I've had to shift and adjust how I organize myself with my current job. And so just figuring out what works now may not work in the future. But one thing that is important, and the book makes this point, is to let them feel the pain and inconvenience of their mistakes. You know, I think we talked last week about like, do you go and like bring them their homework when they forgot their homework, you know, or did they forget their lunch and you bring it to them? No. And, you know, even though you might be able to bring it to them and drop stuff off when they forget it, I think probably the bigger lesson is to be like, yeah, that's too bad you forgot that. That must have made today hard. But they have to muddle through that and figure that out. You know, if they forget their homework or they forget their textbook and their teacher is going to get upset with them about that, they might need to experience that. Because really they need to learn to do this for themselves. With my son gets home before my husband and I do. So he has to let himself in the house. And one day, this was during last semester, it was in the fall sometime, he forgot to put his key back in his backpack. So the next day, his key was inside the house and he didn't have a way to get into the house. And so he had to like sit on the front step and wait for us to get home. And that was too bad for him. You know, that was very boring and he was very unhappy about it. And he was upset with us. And he was like, well, you didn't remind me to put my key in my backpack. And I said, Nathan, you have to learn to do that. You have to, like, that's on you. This is your key, your backpack. You have to learn to do that. And he has not done that again. He puts his key right back in his backpack when he unlocks the door every day now. Like he learned from that. Sharad has a comment. We try to keep a very open discussion with our home, share failures and successes. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that where my daughter is imposing self-pressure. Me being in HR corporate setting, I keep sharing with her how communication, empathy, and skills in the world today are so much more needed than just grades and clubs that you join. You know, that is really true. And one thing, you know, one thing I liked about this section, it spends a lot of time on middle school, which for me personally, because they still have a child in middle school, that was very like helpful. But I really like the part where it, and if you haven't gotten the book, I do suggest it because it goes through high school and kind of like, you know, in the 9th grade year and the 10th grade year and 11th grade year and the 12th grade year. And I was actually, I think I might use this in like at the beginning of the school year, put something out to parents as like kind of a guidance and like things to look for, because I thought it was very helpful and well written. But one of the things it talked about as advice for high school kids is to make relationships with their teachers. Get to know their teachers, not just see their teacher as like the person that's assigning work, but like get to know them and talk to them and have that friendly, you know, where they aren't afraid of their teachers, because then when they have a question or when they don't understand something, it's so much easier to go to the teacher and ask for help. And so that, I think is a really good advice for our kids, kind of what you're saying with the corporate world, I think all of us, we work, and that those relationships with the people you work with, they make your life so much easier. It's not just about getting your work done, but communicating and being able to live with the people, that you're around every day. Irene says, my kids would have gone to a friend's house and play until I asked where they are. They forgot their keys. I understand. Yeah. Well, kids can be pretty resilient. So that's good. So this next question I have, so my next question is, are you currently giving your child the space and opportunity to learn, fail, recover, and move on? If so, what is working well for you? And if not, how could you step back and allow your child some space? This is a heavy question. And let me find it. I actually asked a friend of mine this question. I emailed her and I said, hey, I'm doing this talk with parents tomorrow. Is this something that you have found that you've been able to do? And if so, how is it working out for you? And this is what she said. I'm going to read her email back to me. I used to check grades daily. Now I check every 2 weeks and give them time to recover from mistakes. I'm not micromanaging their assignments like I used to. I wait for them to earn the grade, and at that point offer feedback or how a tutor or I could help them in the next attempt. I used to track Life 360 every hour. Now I only check when I have a good reason to. My personal anxiety is reduced. Their anxiety is also reduced. But if they know they can't manage their responsibilities, there are clear repercussions. No driving, no going out. They know that failure has consequences. Having cell phones and wearing the latest trends is not an entitlement. It's a reward for being responsible. And I just really loved what she had to say about this, that she's backed off. She used to be that parent that was constantly checking their grades and constantly nagging their kids and constantly, oh, what, and 24/7. And she's learned to back off. And I think a lot of us have learned to do that. I think the pandemic is something that's actually taught us that, it's good to take a step back. But what she's discovered is her own personal anxiety is much less. Her children's anxiety is much less, but then she's also taught them those repercussions. And that's kind of the whole, you don't just let them do whatever they want and there's no repercussions. No, there are. You have your expectations as a parent, and your expectation is, I expect you to get your work done. And if you don't, this is going to be the punishment. And you have that agreement. But the trick is you have to follow through. I'm terrible at that. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I may talk a big game, but I don't, this is something I definitely need to work on with my son. I was better with my daughter, but his son's pretty spoiled, not going to lie. But this is something that he's going to have to, especially when he gets into high school. We just had our incoming freshman night last night. I have his for his future high school next week. And so I'm thinking a lot about him going into high school and what we need to change and what we need to be doing better. Because he's somebody that, because I don't know if he's our youngest. We've coddled him a lot. He needs to start doing this more. On his own. So my question to you all, how have you done this? How have you let go? Have you let go on something? And how is that working out for you? Has it backfired? Is it good? Do you find yourself wanting to let go, but you're scared of doing it? What do you guys think? I totally concur with the response from your friend. I was overwhelmed with getting daily alerts from Canvas and need to modify the settings to cut down the notification. Yes, you absolutely can do that. I don't know if you guys know that in Canvas, you can set how often you get notifications, and I absolutely recommend that you do not get daily notifications. You don't need that for your own stress. And that's something I would say as a parent, I haven't ever been one to check grades daily, mostly because I was a teacher and I know the way even though I had the best of intentions when I was teaching to keep up on my grades, I always by mid-semester was behind and bogged down and freaking out. Like I was behind in my grades and oh my gosh, the grades aren't updated. So I know how easy it is for teachers to not keep updated. Even though we, encourage them to, life happens. Stuff happens. So there's really no point in checking it daily. I would say once a week, even every 2 weeks is totally fair. And just give yourself a break. And, if kids aren't getting assignments in, most teachers do take late work. But even if they don't, that's the lesson your kid needs to learn. They didn't turn in an assignment and then they got the 0. Like that's the way it is. We got to learn that. Sherrod says, we really do not micromanage. It works really well for us since there's no pressure from us. My challenge continues to be the self-imposed pressure that is heartbreaking to see that. Oh, absolutely. And this is when we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the academic peer pressure. And, how do we fight that? And so I think one way we can fight this, and this actually, is when having conversations and having a conversation with yourself too. I think maybe that's where it needs to start. And what are you seeing as success for your child? When they are an adult and hopefully not living in your basement, like they're out there on their own, because that's what we want, right? We want them to be living on their own. What are you seeing their life be like? And what is success? What would you define as success? And do you have to shift your own view a little bit? I found that I had to. And, when my daughter was applying for colleges, my daughter graduated in 2021. So her senior year was the year that we were on distance learning. So she didn't really have her senior year. And I've shared with this, she definitely had anxiety, pretty severe depression, which actually stemmed out of that, kind of really kicked off with that wrestling loss. It was bad. And she was not ready to go away to college. In the role that I have, I know exactly what she needed to do to get into a 4-year college. And I guided her through middle school and high school. You need to take these classes. This is what you need to do to get into a 4-year college. I didn't actually care where she went to college, but in my mind, she was going directly to a 4-year college. We didn't need her to go to a community college for financial reasons. In my mind, of course you're going to go to a 4-year college. And when she was like, I don't think I can do this, I need to go to community college and stay home another year, I had to grapple with that with myself. I'm gonna be completely honest. Inside in my and I never said this to her, but deep inside myself, I saw that as a failure. I saw it as failure of me. I felt like she wasn't living up to her potential, and I had to get over that. And so I think that when we talk about this internal pressure, and I think us as parents, we think that we're not always putting pressure, and I think we a lot of times aren't. I think parents, and Ms. Gunter made this comment when we talked about academic peer pressure, that Piedmont parents get a bad rap, that Piedmont parents are always pushing their kids. I don't think that you guys do that at all. I feel like what my experience with Piedmont parents is, you are the most supportive group of parents that I've ever had the pleasure of working with across the board. Piedmont parents are fabulous. But I think that we make comments like, oh, when you go to college, or oh, when you do this, that I think is leading to the pressure. And so I think, having conversations with your kids about what do they want to do? What's their priority? What's important to them? And because they want to please us. And so how do we not only congratulate them on academic stuff, but just on the little stuff, like when they go out to the movies with their friends and they come back and they're smiling and laughing and they had a really great time, tell them that you're proud of them because they went out to the movies with their friends. I mean, they might think you're weird, but at this section, they talk about, two parents and one parent, when the kid leaves to go out with their friends, one parent says, have fun. And the other says, make sure you're wearing a sweater. Like, what are we saying to our kids? I think let's strive to be the parent. This is have fun, have a good time, and trust them that they're going to do what they need to do. Another comment in the chat, I also don't check Canvas daily anymore. Every time I see something, a partial score or a 0, I get so anxious and nag them. Now I just ask my kids if they've turned everything in at the end of the day. I think that that's great. And I think that, but also Mr. Campbell, when he was here with us last week, he made a comment that, in their family, they have this the wow and the pow, what was your wow today? And what was your pow? What sucked, but what was really good? And at least ask them, what was one good thing that happened today? And it might be that they got into the lunch line first and got their lunch right away. It might be something silly. It might, it might be a joke that somebody said in class that made them laugh, but that's have them tell you that. That's important stuff. Thank you, Sherrod. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I think it's important for us as parents, because high school is full of pressure, especially, a school like Piedmont Hills. It is high achieving. Though I will say, I will say that, somebody made a comment, they were talking to a student who just transferred here from Evergreen, and that Piedmont Hills is so much better with the pressure, that it's so much less pressure here than it is at Evergreen. And that was a win for me, because yeah, good. Because we do strive. Okay, I'm reading this comment. So there was a comment in the chat about bullying and how do we address bullying. We are actually doing a school-wide lesson on bullying and cyberbullying on Friday. So the students, that was has been planned and been in the works for quite a while. There's some other stuff in this comment that is rumor, and I'm not going to address that because it's rumors, and I don't think that that's this is not an appropriate place to address rumors. But definitely one thing that we can do and teach our kids about bullying. First off, realize that most bullying that we experience in Piedmont Hills isn't the traditional, somebody is saying stuff in the bathroom or on the bus or something like that. Most of the bullying that we come across is cyberbullying, which is much more difficult for us to control because it's not just happening at school. So teaching your kids how to behave online. A lot of times the kids that we see doing cyberbullying, you would never expect that they would be a bully. So don't assume that your kid's not ever a bully. I think it's actually probably be more cautious and like think that they are capable of being a bully, and teach them how, how should they behave? Like if they aren't going to say something to somebody's face, don't say it online. Don't, a lot of times what we see happening is it's not just on social media, but it will be in a group chat with friends and saying something about another student in a group chat with friends that they think nobody is going to ever see because it's in a group chat with their friends, but then somebody takes a screenshot and publishes it and sends it out. So just like even when you're like, so I think that that's important. So your comment, can we have a session on that topic? Yes, actually, that's a good idea. Next week, and we're actually about to wrap out because we're about to be out of time. So next week, we're going to finish our talk about the book. But when we come back from the February break, how about I present to you guys what we're presenting to the students on Friday, and I will present that to the parents on. So that will be, I'm right here in real time changing my plan. So that will be on March 1st. We'll talk about that topic. We'll talk about bullying and cyberbullying, and I will show you guys the presentation that the students are going to get on Friday. And Vincent says, I drive my daughter and their friends, boys and girls, from time to time, home and places. I get to know who she's hanging out with. I tell my daughter every time for trusting me and giving me a chance to know her friends. It's a win-win solution. I think that's great. I think that's always like, I've done that too, where you're the one driving and hearing how they talk with their friends and what they talk about. I mean, it's fascinating. And it's a really great way to know what's kind of going on in their life. So thank you, Vincent. I think that that's great. Thank you guys for your participation today. This was fun. You guys were great. And I know I pretty much talked, well, I did talk the whole time, but you guys put stuff in the chat and that was wonderful. Thank you. We will finish talking about this book next week. And then don't forget that the week after is the week of, I'm looking at my calendar on the wall, the week of February 20th, there's no school. So we won't have a Zoom with the principal that week. I actually, at this time on that Wednesday, I'm going to be at the dentist. So you guys have a very great week and wonderful weekend. Okay, bye.